Anybody hear my sound right now? Anybody hear my sound right now? Oh, at least I can. I'll be in a second. I'm just cleaning things up here. Experiment to see how well the camera's working, so I'll do some Q&A, but I want to show people a trick on how to troubleshoot, or at least hopefully troubleshoot. I don't know exactly what the problem is yet. Prepping a board, so that's why I have the countdown clock going. But 1 minute away from starting. Okay, apparently somebody was having an issue with their board, and I'm going to show you how to fix it, or at least understand what the problem might be. I think they're working with an SKR 1.4, but I need to go over to my Discord for a second and pull their file down, and then I'll show you what I'm doing. So I need to go to my main chat because it's going to be in general chat. But they posted a file where they said they had an issue. So I asked them to send their configuration.h and their configuration_adv.h. And the rationale you'll see in 2 seconds. So what is occurring is I don't know exactly what the problem is. I don't know exactly what they're working with, but by looking at the file, we'll be able to figure it out. So I'm gonna pull up my downloads folder in just a second so you can see it. I just have to make sure that it's visible. But I wanna keep the identity, obviously, of the person that wanted to see this personal as long as they wanna keep it personal. So I'm going to go over to my desktop and show you what's going on. So on my desktop, I pulled down configuration.h and configuration advanced.h. And technically, that's all I need to figure out what they have. So I'm going to go over to my Marlin folder, which is a fresh extraction. I'm going to open that up. And the files that we need to replace are these two right here. So I'm just going to delete these. You can always rename them. But I'm going to go back to the downloads folder and grab both of these. and copy them into the configuration. And the assumption in this case is that inside here, we're on the same version of Marlin. So I think it was right here. We'll find out if it works in a second. But I'm going to go over to VS Code now and just open it up like normal. So inside VS Code, I'm going to go to the Explorer, then Open folder, then my Downloads folder, then the Marlin folder, then the other Marlin folder, and then Select folder. You may not be able to see that the way I have this set up, but I'm reading it off as I'm doing it. So as you can see, we got our Marlin folder over here with our configurations. I'm hoping I put them in the right place. They might be someplace else. But let's try a basic compile after we figure out what kind of board they have. So I'm going to do a search on motherboard. And the reason I did this way is so that I can get an idea of what they're working with. So it looks like they're working with a turbo, so the SKR14 turbo. So I know from experience what it is for a chipset, but I'll show you how I figure it out. So if you go to source for boards.h, you do a search on SKR_1, you'll see that this is the regular SKR, and then the turbo's down here. The actual chipset is LPC1769. So that's going to be our default environment for platform io.ini. So we're going to replace this with LPC1769. And so all we want to do is see if it compiles. So I'm going to click the checkbox for the moment and see what's going on in the chat. This may fail because I was working with the GTR last night, so this might be interesting. Hang on a second while I get the chat up here. Hey Eric. Hey what is it? C3DS. How you guys doing tonight? Is everybody does anybody want to say where they're from so I have an idea of who I'm talking to, or you don't have to? It's just sometimes I try and say something linguistically correct. But let me check on VS Code here. So it did fail. So I'm going to hit the clean. And then I'm going to rebuild again. Because the GTR was in there last night. So that's probably why it's not doing too well. I'll move this up so you can see. It should be fine, but it might fail. Let me peek on the chat here. So Eric, you're getting some snow right now? Apparently we're getting about, well, I'm going to say it in centimeters, but we're getting about 2.5 centimeters an hour here. So it was a little bit of fun moving the car at this time of the day. Well, Florida's a little bit warmer. Let's see. So the compile did fail again. So I don't know what's going on with their file, but let's look around. Find the first error that occurs. So I'm going to go to the top. I don't see anything up until this point right here. So it's something about the probe offset. Starts with a negative value. I don't know what that means, but let's see if we can skip to it. This is probably going to be the sanity check. So probe offset wizard requires probe offset start. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go over to configuration.h because I'm guessing that's where it's occurring. So I need to minimize some files here because I don't know exactly where this person is working. So I'm going to minimize all these, go to configuration.h, do a search on that, and I don't see it. So I'm going to go to configuration advanced and do it again and search. So apparently I don't know what the error is, which is new to me. So let's try the next error. It looks like they may have added functionality, or this might be a custom version of Marlin. Short manual Z move. Most of the stuff I haven't seen before, so I'm just trying to understand what they're doing. So apparently I'm really clueless. So we'll go back and see if we can figure out what this actually is. So it's something to do with the LCD. I'm guessing it's a program that runs for the LCD. It's probably a touch screen, so let's go back to configuration.h and see if we can unwind this logic. So configuration.h, it does look like they have a second screen. It also looks like they're doing their serial port in an interesting way. Normally I do -1, then this would be the serial port for the LCD. So I'd probably have to ask this person for more information. It looks like they're changing their speed from the default, which is usually 250,000 bits. So I probably have to ask this person more information. I'm guessing that's their printer type, but there's some special stuff going on. So one of the things we might be able to do is try and disable the screen, but I think there's more settings for screens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unzip a second version of this and do a file compare and see what I can decipher from that. So I'm going to take you over to my my desktop for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to downloads. I'm going to right click, do extract all. It's probably going to ask me if it's going to be re-enumerated. Hopefully I'm not going to copy over it. But this may take a moment. Let me move it over so you can see what's going on. So I'll check on the chat while this is going on. Adrenos for MATLAB. Obviously I don't know exactly what's going on with what you're working with. I can look at it sometime, probably not today, because I need to understand what you're talking about. But obviously I'm seeing a couple of things here you're talking about. There's probably a special device that connects to your Adreno, maybe a hat. But let me check on this unzip here. It's not going well. So I'm going to replace the files. And I'll show you what I'm going to do instead. So I'm just overwriting what I did before. And it may fail because I'm connected to them. So let me close this right here real quick. Close folder. So basically I'm overwriting what I just did. But I'll show you what I can do. We'll rename this right now to Advanced 2. And we'll rename this one to Configuration 2. And this will give us a better idea of what's actually occurring in theory. So I'm going to copy both of these. I'm going to go into where Marlin is. And I'm going to paste them where they should be, which is right here. Now I'm going to use something like SVN to find out what the differences between the files are. So I'm going to click on configuration.h, hold the control button, and click on the second one, right click, and if you have Tortoise SVN, you can do a diff. There are other types of diffs, but let me show you what's occurring. I have to move it over. So let me make sure you're seeing it. So here's a diff between them. So one is on the left-hand side over here, is the unchanged file as if you were to download it. The one on the right is the changed one. So you can see the differences as you go down because they highlight them. So there may be some things that he or she is changing, but it looks like they're relatively close at the moment. So if we look here, it looks like they made a mod to this line. They may be customizing stuff, or they may have a custom file. You can see there's a difference in speed. Obviously, you can see the difference in naming. And then it looks like they've got some kind of Prusa thing going on with a multiplexer, but it could be that it's offset. So those are some of the basic changes that you're seeing right away. And down in here, looks like they're doing something special with the PSU. PSU is power supply unit. It looks like it's taking a G code, and then they have a comment after it saying G code to run after power on. So it looks like they're turning on a case light or off. I don't know because I haven't actually set up a case light. So that's one thing that's different. And then it looks like there's something going on with the temperature. Not exactly sure, but there's some kind of timeout. So this might be a custom file. This has happened to me before. As you can see, there's huge differences. So they're using a custom sensor. They're not using the default one. So we know what kind of hardware they're working with, essentially. But they have some other stuff that's special in here. So for me to troubleshoot, it's kind of difficult because I might not have this equipment. But you can see that they have maxes set for the temperature. But this gives you an idea of how to be analytical and help out other people. So the PID, this is probably a special calibration that they did because it's 20. Then their extruder max length is double what's normal. So the distance might be twice. They've modified their end stops to be the inverse of what they normally are. So if it were true, it's now false. That's essentially what this says on the right-hand side. Then they may have an additional probe sensor for, it looks like a BL Touch. They also have something going on with their stepper drivers. I don't know if it's notes to themselves, but I do have these steppers, I think, so maybe we can try those out. But they're not actually using them because they're TMC 2209s. Looks like they're using the RepRap configuration wizard or RepRap calculator. This probably is off on their setup because I discovered that it's slightly different from reality now because of the types of printers, but that's a good place to start. So now that we know a little bit about this, they changed their acceleration to a slower movement. So they might be doing something very interesting like a CNC router. But they're definitely knowledgeable in what they're doing, it looks like. So Z-homing, they're using a probe. The reason I picked that out was up here. Well, needless to say, we know that now. Let's see what we got here. They're defining their servos. They're using a BL Touch. Whoop. Actually, their servos, I don't know what they're doing. Oh, they're uncommented, sorry. Normally you set the number of servos. Let's see if we can find that. That might be one of the issues. But as you can see, it's a little different than normal for trying to troubleshoot a problem when you don't know exactly what it is. But usually fixing certain problems might resolve others. Usually the first ones. So they have an offset set for, this is actually a special leveling algorithm. There's different types. I think there's 3 different types. And so this one explains what's going on. And then they're probably not using these. But I'm just reading through this quickly to get an idea of what they're talking about. So it's kind of advanced stuff. It's a lot of setting changes. They may have used the examples file. That's why it looks very different. This is inverted because of the stepper they're using, probably. Their bed size is slightly bigger, so I'm guessing that it's possibly a Creality type bed or Ender type bed. But it's a Prusa design probably that they're working with. So here's a lot of new information, it looks like. So I'm not sure which version of the firmware they're actually using. This may be older, so we might be able to find something in the beginning of it. I'm going to check on the chat just because I'm going off on a tangent here. Hey Eduardo, how's it going? Sorry I don't Falio Portuguesa too well. So the M4 extruder, I don't know exactly what that is. Let me Google it real quick here to see what you're actually referring to. Is it made by MakerBot, the M4, or is it Veron? Okay, so it's direct extrusion, or at least that's what it looks like from the picture. So I'll just pull this over so you can see what he's talking about. So it looks like it's belt driven, and the extruder goes right through the motor, is my guess. See what they have in the manual. Oh, you have to download the manual. See if I can pull it up. So it's a belt-driven extruder. And it looks like it goes through this chamber. That's interesting, though. Let me go back to what I was talking about here. So we know there's some special stuff going on with runout sensors. It looks like they're running well, they're not running these, but they're in the file. They're commented out. So this might be a different version of Marlin. I'm not exactly sure where they got it, but that might be helpful in understanding what's in it. But we can use a browser to tease that out possibly. So they might be doing mesh leveling. Not exactly sure what they're doing exactly, but I'm getting an idea just by reading through here. But it's the pattern in which they level on their surface. I've stopped using leveling personally because I've become somewhat adept at leveling the surface, although there have been times you guys have seen me have fun with it. Let's see, Z-Safe homing still has to do with the BL Touch. The speed's been changed here somewhat. Looks like they enabled EEPROM, it's off by default. Then they have their temperature limits. They might be parking their nozzle. Clean nozzle. Looks like they're running an algorithm that causes it to go over to a corner and clean itself off. And then they are keeping track of how many prints they've done on the printer for some statistical purpose. Looks like they're using German on their LCD, but they're setting up an LCD that possibly, I'm guessing it's a TFT display, but they're connecting it possibly through the cabling of the ribbon cables, because normally you wouldn't set this here, you would set it on the firmware for the actual one that you're working with, meaning you'd update the firmware on the TFT display. Looks like they're trying to use SD support, so there may be ribbon cables in some cases in here, I'm not sure yet. And it looks like they're changing the way the actual menu moves for the dial. So it might be going backwards, so they thought they'd turn it on. But I'm still not sure because there's a config file for that. So it might be that they have an understanding of what they're doing, but parts of it they need to figure out. But looks like right here, this is the definition you use for the parallel or ribbon cables. But up above they were specifying a second serial port, so it could be that they're using Wi-Fi, and I'm just misreading this entirely. Because the board is capable of Wi-Fi. And then they've got some additional settings that are not normally in here. And then let's see. Looks like there's something special going on now. Not exactly sure what's going on, but obviously this Marlin software that they have is extremely modified. So to find the mistake that we saw earlier, we can recompile it with the changes, and I'll rename the files. Then we'll search to see if we can find anything in these files. But that's just the configuration.h. Close out of this and look at the other one real quick. So I'm going to highlight both, right click, and we'll probably do it a quicker method here. I think there's a button to go down to next differences. So they've got some kind of temperature algorithm going. Watts temperature periods. Got something going on with the chamber possibly. And overheating of the chamber. Then they've turned on auto fans. So this was the thing I was trying to find for extruders yesterday. What they're actually using it on is their extruder. So I believe that's the extruder number 2. But we can check on the pinouts for that because it's going to probably be P24 or P or 2_04. But we can look at that right now actually. Let me pull that up. So I'm not sure how much troubleshooting I'm going to do on this until I get more answers from the person. But let's take a look at the browser for a second. And let me pull up the browser. So in here, we're going to search on Big Tree Tech. Well, we're already there. So they're going to be working in here. The Big Tree Tech, we're going to go to hardware and we'll look for pins. I'm guessing that's the one. So 2.4 is right over here, so it's their second extruder because this is the first one. So we know what they're doing vaguely. They're using this fan to automatically go on when they turn on the heater. So let's go back over real quick and then I'm going to finish this up and we'll do something else. I'm actually trying to test the camera to make sure that it stays on for over a half an hour. That was one of the reasons I did this. So desktop. So chamber temperatures, do the next difference. Doesn't look like there's too many differences in here. They're doing something for the BL Touch. So I'm guessing they have a BL Touch that they're worried about, their actual type. I'm not sure if this is actually valid, meaning that I've had issues with the BL Touch and it wasn't related to power, but that's just me, and that's also new. But I'll be figuring that out eventually. I don't know if they're doing anything with tramming, because it's already enabled. They're just changing the values a little. Tramming, I believe, is also known as leveling. I think it's a different term for it, but correct me if I'm wrong. And default stepper deactivation time, so that's the time it times out probably. But I don't think there's going to be a lot more to find. Adaptive smoothing. Oh, camera didn't work as long as I thought. Oh, still at 30 minutes. So let's go back and see if you have any questions on your stuff. So hang on, let me turn on the camera. So does anybody have any questions on what they're working with right now that's in the realm of 3D printing? Yeah, that's what they're using it for, is probably a cooling fan. So essentially, I was looking at their setup. And obviously, I don't know all of what they're trying to do yet. But essentially, I'm slightly confused because their question was about a servo and a optical end stop. So I didn't see at the time what they were talking about. They're probably talking about a BL Touch with that, and there may be a third mechanical thing going on. So it's kind of hard for me to tell. So I probably have to ask them more questions. But that's the method that I use to kind of troubleshoot stuff, is I'll look at what they're working with and then go from there. So I don't know if people want to see the GTR, and we'll do some more stuff like the fan stuff that we did yesterday. I want to see if I can actually set it up correctly again. I want to have it go on automatically without using the ports for power, meaning the extruder ports or hot end ports. But let me get this out of the way. And I'll bring in the GTR because I know a lot of people want to see that for some reason. So I just have to grab it. So here's the GTR. Just prepping it so it doesn't slide around on the table on us. And all I want to figure out is the hot end. And generally when you activate the hot end, you're going to see something going on. Let me see what it looks like under the camera. Okay, that's okay, I guess. So I'm going to connect the power with no power attached. Let me double check down below. Yep, no power. So this is for steppers. Trying to do this one-handed at the same time talk. Apparently chewing gum's difficult. I'm going to slide that in. Just torque it down. I'll slide this in and torque it down. Then do these. This is for the board power. So this is the voltage side. I'm only running 12 volts on this board right now, but it's capable of 24 volts. Okay, so the power's in nice and taut. So I'm just going to close that, maybe bring it up for a second because the reflection's kind of hard to deal with. And so what we want to do is actually hook up, in this case, a diamond print head. So it's a 4mm print head. It has a fan on top. I did this last night, so I'll probably go over stuff kind of quick. So these are the actual barrels that I put on last night for safety. So you can pop this off, and then you can pop it inside here. Polarity doesn't matter, so ground and voltage are essentially in a circular type thing. They don't care which is which. I'm going to tighten this down. But the ferrules are there for safety so that wires don't accidentally cross. So that keeps them nice and separated and contained. So then all you have to do is, in this case, just drop it in. So that will power this. But we want to power the fan. So it's the first port, like last night. And then we have to do the thermistor. And for those who don't understand how the thermistor works, it's a glass bead inside a wire. And you're sending current through it. And it's known to be proportional based on the temperature, how fast the electrons move. So that's how you can tell with the voltage if it's hot or cold, based on a proportional understanding of how copper reacts with glass in it at a certain speed. So I'm going to find a way to prop this up a little, because it makes me nervous having it directly on a wooden bench, even though it probably won't catch on fire. I'm going to put it on a metal weight just to keep it off there. And I'm probably not going to run it at a high temperature. This is more just for safety. So now that we have that set up, I'm going to figure out how to set this up. We're not going to use any steppers. We're just going to turn on the heat. Hopefully the thermistor isn't broken. Otherwise, we'll have more troubleshooting. So I'm going to have to first clean out this file for config.h. So I'm going to delete those files out, even though I don't need to. And then I'm just going to go directly into VS Code. So let's go to VS Code. And I'm going to click on the Explorer. Then open folder. You might not be able to see this part, but I'm just going to my downloads folder, the Marlin folder, then the Marlin folder, then select folder. And then inside here, we'll go to probably the default places that we once were, but we have to set up the GTR board. So let me clean this up so it's visually pleasing to me. So core boards, search on GTR_V, copy the board. Then we'll go back over to configuration.h, search on motherboard, paste it over the ramps, scroll up, change it to -1 for this value. It probably would work with 0, but I like using -1 because it's more consistent for me. And then we have to set the actual extruders. So now I need to look for them here. So we technically will have 3 extruders with this because it's the diamond print head. The diameter is still going to be the same for the actual filament. And then we're going to say that it has a single print head. Because if we say that it's got 3 extruders, then we have to specify the actual extruders and each one of the thermistors. In this case, we have 1 thermistor. So it's 1 heater or heat cartridge and 1 thermistor. So I'll scroll down and thermistors will be down here someplace. So let's see if we can find them. So here we are. So it's already set to 1. I'm guessing that that's going to be close. But they have a list of different ones that you can go through. And you can match it to your particular thermistor if you have one. And then we're not using a heat bed, so I'm not going to worry about that. We don't have a temperature sensor probe, which I don't know what that is now. And we don't have a chamber. So we're set there. There's probably going to be something else that's going to be wrong. But let's try and set it in platformio.ini. So I'm going to do a search on GTR_V. That'll bring us to the default environment. Copy that. And I'll go all the way back up to the top. And I'll paste it over our environment. And then I'm going to do a clean because I know it's probably going to fail. And then I'll do a build with the checkbox. Then I'll check on the chat because hopefully I didn't forget to move the screens. Should you be able to see the screen? Do you mean VS Code? Because I think that's what... Oh, I see what you're saying. My bad. Sorry, I was doing a test run tonight, and I still need to buy a third screen, apparently, so I can see the chat. Apparently, I go off on tangents, but I changed this in the default environment up here, and I'll show you what else I changed in a second. So here's the default environment was Mega 2560, and then for configuration H, I was checking the thermistors. We only are using this one right here, but I was checking to see if it compiles. The other thing that I set was up here. Sorry, I have to scroll up for a second. So here it's got 3 extruders. The extruders are the stepper motors. This is the actual width of the filament. And then I uncommented single nozzle. And then up here, I set the serial port to -1 from 0. And I set the motherboard to board _ BTT _ GTR _ V1 _ 0. And that was found inside here in boards.h so that we know which board to use. So all the boards are listed. I just do this so I get the correct name and don't type it in accidentally wrong. Theoretically, we could also use the numbers, so I'll show you that trick because you probably haven't seen it. But we could copy this number, and in theory, you used to be able to build with this as the number. So let's try it out and see if it works. If this fails, then apparently it doesn't work, but it used to. I just don't like using it because then you don't know exactly what it is. And then you have to go to your boards file and hopefully it hasn't changed between build versions of the Marlin firmware. But it does work. So that's just another way to do it if you like to shorthand it. I don't like to memorize these. I just like to go by the names. But essentially they're associated to each other, these numbers. Kind of like a database. So now that we got that built, we need to make changes in here. So one of the changes that we need to make is we want to see if we can do the fan. So I can't remember exactly where it is, so we'll do controller fan. Oop, I'm not searching, am I? Hang on a second. So you're going to click here, Control F. We'll do controller _ fan. And that's not, whoop, I got to spell fan correctly. No, that's not going to work. So we'll try fan controller. That's not working either. So we'll search on fan. And there's going to be a bunch of things. So I'll find this eventually. There's only 150 things to go through. It's probably at the beginning of the file and I'm halfway through it. Here we go. Use controller fan. And that says turns on automatically whenever a driver is enabled. We don't want that one. We want the one for the hot end. So we're going to see a bunch of -1s. There it is. Okay. So extruder cooling fans. So we're going to use a particular fan. In this case, we're going to use the very first one. So we need to go to the actual documentation. So I'm going to bring you over to the web browser before I actually start talking and lose everybody in this. So here's the browser. So inside the browser, I've actually got to pull it up myself. The fan port is not the one I'm looking at. So it's over here. So we have the GTR, which is PE5. So that's the one we want to use. So it might be PE5 correctly, but we need to look in VS Code. So I'll go back over there and I'll double check on the chat to make sure I'm not like off on a tangent again. So let me look at the questions real quick here. Okay, so let me go back over here. So in VS Code, I'm going to go back over to the pins file. And I think our pins are in one of these two. So there it is. Inside here, we're going to look for PE5, I believe. Let me just peek myself here. PE5. So I'm going to do a search on PE5, see if it exists. And it does. So we're going to use that as the fan pin. So I'm going to copy this. I don't know if this is going to work because this failed the other day when I tried to do it. But let's see what happens. We can always jump to a different set of pins if that's the case. So now that I'm here in... Whoop, I'm not in configuration advanced. There we go. You're going to change the -1 to an actual value of PE5. So once the temperature goes on, in this case, the extruder auto fan temperature is 50 degrees. So I'm going to set it to 60. And then the max speed right now is 255. So to show you the contrast, I'm going to do 200. Just remember that if you go 50% of 255, it may not work because it needs a certain amount of current to turn. And we don't have a chamber, so we don't need to worry about that. So I'm going to do a clean, and then I'm going to do a build. And while that's going on, I'm going to pop the drive out of the GTR. And I'm going to put it in my computer. Now it failed, so this was to be expected. So I'm going to look at it in 2 seconds. And it's probably going to tell me that you can't use that one. So, yep, it said it can't be equal to the fan pin. So let's try a different number. So I'm going to go over to the browser and I'm going to pick out a different number. This may be a series of errors. Let me just check to see if the browser is working. There we go. So inside the browser, we have another number. We could do PE6 or PE or PC8. Let's try PC8 because I think we're going to have bad luck with PE6. So I'm going to go back over to VS Code. And inside VS Code, we'll try that. PC6. Let me double check it. I'm sorry, PC8. And then I'm going to do a clean, and then I'm going to do a build again, and this probably will fail, but there might be something that I need to learn about this particular board. Should be able to get away with things like this, but they may have structured it in a way where I'm not allowed to do it. There was a time when you could do it, so that's why I'm confused. So far so good, but I may have just jinxed myself. Okay, that's good. So I'm going to go to .pio, then build, then Big Tree Tech, right click. I'm going to say reveal an explorer, and I'll show you what's going on in 2 seconds. So inside Explorer, I open this folder, and inside that folder there's firmware.bin, so I'm going to send that over to the USB drive. Then I'm going to pop out the drive and install it inside the workbench. So I'll transition to the workbench so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm taking out the actual drive and plugging it back in here. And then I have to move this over to here. So in theory, when this reaches 50 degrees, we'll be able to actually see the fan go on. So I'll bring up a view that you can see that in a second, but I'm going to first plug it in and make sure there's not a lot of smoke. And if you can't see down here a flashing green light, that's the firmware loading, or allegedly loading. So I'm going to go over to Pronterface in a second. So inside Pronterface, we're going to need to connect to the board. Now I don't think the COM port's changed, but to verify that the COM port is actually working right, we can go over to here, pull up our device manager, and inside our device manager, it's COM port 4. This one is usually default to the computer. So now that we know that, we can go back over to Pronterface. Inside Pronterface, I'm going to connect to the board. And it says it's online down here. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing this to turn on the fan, because this is actually going to be a different number, and if you need to know how to turn that on, I'll show you that right now. So it says M106E0S200, so that's the fan speed. Let's see if we can turn it on manually. I'm going to say P2. This is my guess. I could be wrong. And let's see if it works. So apparently it's not working. So the reason that it's not working is if you see the board, there's a light that just went on. That looks like it's a different port. So let's try turning it off by doing S0. And the light goes off, so it's telling me that I'm in the wrong port. Let's try the same command, but with 4. This may not work, because I might not know what the number is, or it's protected. So I don't see a light that went on. So I'm going to ignore that because maybe it's not allowing me to do it. But I'm still going to set this to 0 just in case. And we'll try it with heat. So I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to set the temperature for the heat not to 200. But I'm going to set it to 60. That's degrees Celsius. So I'm going to click on that. And the temperature is going to rise. And you could probably see it. Hang on, I got to fix this here. You can probably see that it says -15. That doesn't look right. But over here it's rising. So I'm guessing this temperature. Normally it shows over here. There might be something funky going on. Oh, it just died. So I'm going to disconnect and reconnect, hopefully, if it lets me. Apparently it's not letting me, so I'm going to have to close it down. I'll bring you to the desktop so that you can make sure there's no flames coming out while I do this. So I need to kill this session by closing the program. I'm just describing what I'm doing. I'm not letting you see it because I'm not really embarrassed by it. It just happens. Then I'm going to open a new version of it here, but I have to remap it so you can see it. I think. If it opens. Any day now it should open. I may have to go to my oh, there we go. So let me see if I can bring this up for you. Okay, it looks like it's good. I'm going to reconnect and transfer you over. And then I'm going to go back into it. Like I got 2 versions of it open, so let me close one. Might get messy, so See if you're seeing it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to connect again. Apparently it doesn't want to connect. So the issue right now is something to do with the power. So I'm going to pull the plug. Let everything discharge. Pull the plug again. And now my printer face is better. So I'm going to plug this back in. But I'm going to check these connections, because I have a feeling I plugged something in the wrong place. So actually what I want to do is double check the thermistor connection. So I'm going to go over to the browser so we can see this, because I may have plugged into the wrong thing. So in the browser, well, if the browser shows up, there we go. I have to do this differently, so hang on a second. So in the browser, as you can see right here, there's a thermistor that I'm looking for. So it's going to be the bed, then it's going to be T0. So I was plugged into the bed. So we're going to fix that now. That's why it's probably failing. I guess it's good that I showed you my failure. So I'm going to de-energize. Not this port, it's this port. I'm going to plug this back in. I'm going to plug in the whole unit again, and hopefully we won't see smoke. Okay, and now let's go over to printer face. Inside printer face, we're going to connect. This printer is now online. Now we're going to go back over to the temperature, which is set to 60, and click on it. And notice how the temperature was correct now. Sometimes it's good to show you my mistakes. Normally when I record a video, I filter them out so you don't get to see them. But watch the fan. Let me make sure I can see it. Okay, yeah, the fan angle is pretty good. So in theory, when this reaches 60, it'll go on. So we're at 31 degrees. Oh, I'm sorry, 50 degrees Celsius. I'll wake up in a minute. Let me check on the chat. Okay. Let me go back. So any moment now, this is actually heating up. It's not terribly hot, but it's working. I just don't like to crank it all the way up when I'm doing a test. So the fan went on. So that's how you do the automatic fan that I was trying to show you yesterday and couldn't figure out how to do, and showed you a G-code workaround. That's the actual trick to doing it. So now about 7 o'clock. I wasn't planning on doing a pop-up tutorial. I was planning on testing the actual camera. But for those of you that showed up, thank you very much. For those that have been subscribing to my Patreon and to my Twitch account, it's greatly appreciated. Remember, Twitch on Amazon will allow you one account to subscribe to a month. It's a great way to offset my costs by subscribing either to Twitch or possibly Patreon. It's only $3 a month. But eventually I'll do something special for people when we get to about 50 subscribers. But for now, we're slowly building. Actually, this week it's actually accelerated a great deal. Granted, it's 2 people. But it's the fastest growth I've seen in 3 years. So I'm happy about that. But for those of you that have been doing that, thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm a little bit worn out today. So I might do another pop-up stream this week, depending upon the weather, because we might get a couple of, well, we call it feet, you call it meters of snow. So if I'm stuck at home, maybe I'll do a pop-up stream during the day. So thank you very much, and everyone take care and be safe.